So welcome to today's webinar, everybody. This is the third webinar in our series of 4 around zero trust principles. Today we're going to talk about controlling insider risk. So just to recap, and if you're new to joining the series, so my name is Ben Norcutt. I'm a technical consultant at Somerford Associates, and I have a focus on Netskope, and I've been working in the cloud and data protection space for a number of years. And today I'm joined again by Tim Sharples from Netskope, so I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi everybody, yeah, I'm Tim Sharples from Netskope. I'm a solutions engineer, which predominantly focusing on the public sector. So really excited to talk to you all today about insider risk.
Perfect, thank you, Tim. I'm just going to turn my camera off while we go through the rest of the content. Who are Somerford Associates? We partner with leading technology providers. We have a focus on things like data security, cloud migrations, threat detection, and more. We have the highest level of partner status with our partner vendors, and we provide end-to-end delivery. So we have project managers, we have professional services, we have our own support desk to support our customers, and we've got experience in large and complex deployments of our vendors' technologies. So we offer a full license resell and management. We go through use case design workshops, looking at existing architectures and designs. As I said, we have our own dedicated support desk, so I won't go through everything on the slide, but we run executive forums and focus groups, and we also do things like free annual health checks for our customers. And I'll pass over to Tim to do an introduction to Netskope.
Yeah, so if you could advance the slide, Ben. There we go. So Netskope is, for those of you who don't know us, we're an SSE and SASE platform, so Secure Services Edge and Secure Access Service can't talk this morning. We're SSE and SASE platform, which securely connects users to any destination with the speed and resilience of modern cloud network. So predominantly we're about connecting users to their applications. So we do this through one console with one policy engine, and ultimately by doing everything in one place through our New Edge network, we're able to provide that fantastic user experience that our users come to expect. So the key thing about Netskope is doing everything in one place, and hopefully we'll be able to show this to you a little bit later on. So back to you, Ben.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. So what is insider risk? So it's a key thing. So just a few definitions for you. An insider, effectively any person who has or previously had authorized access to or knowledge of the organization's resources. So, somebody that was is a current employee is obviously an insider. They're inside the business, but it could be people that previously they potentially and shouldn't no longer have access to corporate resources. They have information about corporate resources and structure. Could be people within the organization, processes that happen within the organization, and what types of IT and facilities. Now, an insider is an insider or group of insiders that either intends to or is lost or lost to the organization. And everybody that works, everybody is a potential threat or accident inside a point of view. But yeah, there is possibility of harm. And then an insider risk is the likelihood of harm lost in an organization, and then its subsequent impact to the business because of the action or potential inaction of an insider. So this comes along with the accidental insider, the malicious insider actually looking to exfiltrate data, or people seeing something that's not quite right and not actually reporting it as well. So those are all risks to the organization. And then you have the insider event. So as it says, the activity conducted by an insider, whether intentional or unintentional, that could result in or has resulted in harm or loss to the organization. And this could be as simple as, sending an email with a sensitive attachment and not checking the list of people it's going to and sending it to the wrong people. I've had content sent to me that wasn't meant for me. Somebody had my email address from previous communication, and as you start to type and it auto completes, you can quite easily pick the wrong person to send an email to. And if we look at why it's complicated, so we've got the people within the business, their location, their motivation for the event, the activity that's being performed, and the types of data. So we look at it as a who, where, why, how, and what. So as an example, if we look at a manager who's not in the corporate office, which obviously happens a lot these days, unintentional, incorrect permissions, accessing internal only documents. They don't realise that they potentially shouldn't have access to this document. It's all to do with the internal controls and the structure that's been placed around. So they didn't mean to access documents, that they weren't entitled to open. Versus something like an IT admin, somebody with keys to the kingdom. They're in an office, it's intentional is their motivation, and they're abusing their access powers to access, restricted information. So sort of roles-based access controls, least privilege access, as we've been talking about for the zero trust. An IT admin traditionally has the keys to the kingdom, but does that mean they should be able to read all documents? No. So we have to have our controls in place. And, the key takeaway from this is, there is a very, very large number of possible insider threats, and it's not the malicious, it's not the fraud, it's not the, malignant type of threat that we just have to be worried about. That sort of unintentional piece as well. So user education is very important. You can't eliminate insider threats as long as you have employees. There is a scope and possibility there for too many possibilities and too many things to happen, but we can mitigate and manage it. And this is what cybersecurity is all about in a nutshell, is mitigating and managing risk to an organization. Yeah, and Netskope SASE platform is, a platform that can assist with this, hence why we're presenting to you today. So what could be the impact of an insider breach? So if we take this scenario, employing a rogue agent. Okay, so you may have seen this in the news, but I'm not going to mention any names, but a very well-known cybersecurity awareness and training provider actually hired a North Korean fake IT worker for a software engineering role on its AI team. And they only realised the mistake once the company provided laptop was being used for evil. Okay, now they did some due diligence. Their HR team conducted 4 video interviews with the candidate. They confirmed his appearance matched a photo included with the job application, and they did actually undertake background checks. So everything checked out okay. The fake worker was hired, and they sent off his Mac to an address that was given so that he could start work. And literally as soon as this person received their Mac, it started to load malware on it, started to do malicious activity. So it turned out that they'd used a stolen US-based ID and a stock photo modified with AI, and we're going to talk about AI and the impact in our next webinar in this series, but they faked their identity. But the security software that was installed on the Mac detected the malware, detected the things that are happening, and the security operations center tried to call the employee to say, what's going on. And the fake employee claimed he was simply troubleshooting the speed issue with his router, and that it may have caused a compromise. They tried to help, but he soon became unresponsive. So he obviously wasn't willing to work with them. And basically, he started to try installing unauthorized software, gain access to company resources, and quickly, it was shut down. So the IT department were able to analyze what happened and actually revoke his access. And it turned out, well, they surmised that it was sent to a mule farm in North Korea or China, and they were using VPNs to hide their true location. So, they did a bunch of due diligence. In today's world, we obviously, do things like interviews via Zoom. But so this shows employee screening can only go so far. But it was their systems in place for monitoring and alerting that really saved the day. As soon as bad things happened and malware was trying to be downloaded and installed, the security systems kicked off. So that's a good point. And then, as with anything, remediation of what happened and learning from the event. So any event is a learning activity. We look at what happened, we learn from it, we change our rules, we change our policies and procedures, we bolster our defenses. So it's a great learning experience. So now I'm going to hand back over to Tim, and he's going to talk to you about the Netskope solution and how that can help you. And I'll stop sharing so Tim can share.
Thank you. So if we start with risk, rather than looking at the actual threats first, this allows us to reduce down actually the amount of data that we need to look at. So when we think about the threats involved in an organization, there's a lot of different people, there's a lot of different actors involved, both internal to the organization and external. And we don't know who they actually are and the actual threats they might actually possess, how they might impact us. But what we do know is the actual data that we hold. So what data that we have, is it public data? Is it confidential? Is it restricted? Is it something that we need to protect? So when we're looking at these sort of strategies, we need to start looking at that insider risk first, really, and then we can go from there and provide those policies which actually ultimately reduce down the impact of those threats. So if I look at this from the perspective of how we would build this out, the first thing we want to do is actually, like I said, start with data protection. So look at that data that we want to protect, what is important to us, and then start to bring in user and application controls. So, if this data is important to us, then we want to, set specifications, set requirements around when we can actually access that data and how we need to access that data. And then finally, we can use analytics to, monitor and see who is accessing that data, when they're accessing that data, and how they're accessing that data. And this is where Netskope comes in to sort of provide a bit of a guardrail, a holistic solution around all of this. So, we can start with things like contextual based controls. So, looking at, who someone is, we can look at where they are, whether they're on premise, off premise, and whether their device meets certain compliance requirements that we have. Because obviously, if a device is not compliant, then we certainly don't want it accessing, certain types of data. So when we're looking at those contextual based controls, we can merge them together with, what's happening from a data protection. So, is it public data? Do we want public data to be accessed whenever? Probably. Is it restricted data? Actually, maybe that needs to be accessed from only managed, secure devices. We can then start to bring in behavioral analytics to really analyze, what users are doing. So, when people are accessing data, are they suddenly downloading a lot of files which they've never done before? Are they suddenly trying to upload a lot of files that they've suddenly done before? So both of those entities could be indicators of, malicious activity, someone trying to either exfiltrate data or, share that data out. And finally, we can start to bring in some coaching policies around this. So if someone's device isn't compliant, if someone as a user isn't compliant, then let's notify them. Let's let them know. Maybe they're a malicious actor and they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to contact IT to help resolve the issue. But that's fine, because actually they then know that we're watching them. If they are an unintentional user and they've accidentally done something, then they're really going to appreciate that input to actually help them out with what they've done and where they need to go next. And we bake all of this into our analytics to actually analyze what's gone on. So if I jump into a little bit of a demo, I'm just going to show you a few things that we can do with Netskope, which can really sort of help in each of these areas to make your life easier when you're trying to protect data. So I'll just jump across to my demo user here. So it's good old Peter Parker again from the other demos, and he's logged into his device. Now, his device has developed a compromise, and we can see this here in our classification. So he's suddenly become a high risk device. So maybe actually there's something gone on here. He's not up to the policy, and I'll show you what that policy looks like in a moment. But maybe actually he's not on this policy allowed to access certain forms of data. I mean, the common one here would be, well, actually, if you're high risk, should you actually be going into, our corporate OneDrive area? So if I go and try and log into OneDrive now, as Mr. Parker, just go through our login page. What's going to happen is Netskope's going to look at the state of this device. Now we've seen, oh, actually, you've got some malware on your device. So maybe, this user's been downloading malware, and actually probably he shouldn't be allowed to access, corporate resources whilst that device is, compromised. I'm going to acknowledge that, and we're not allowed in. Now, if we want to have a look at what this actually looks like from a Netskope perspective, I'm just going to jump in here and show you a couple of these policies and what we're seeing and why we've classified him in this way. So over in our policy section, we've got a couple of checks in place. So whenever Peter Parker is logging into his Microsoft accounts, we're actually going to analyze the status of him. So we've got a little score element here. So we're going to say, oh, actually, what's the score? How is he, acting as a user? And we'll dig into that in a second. And also we're going to have a look at how's his device, behaving. Is it a high risk device? Is it a low risk device? And what does that mean? So we've got a couple of checks where we're looking at both, the user and the device when it comes to actual compliance and accessing our data, which, typically sits within an area like Microsoft and OneDrive. So if we look first into what's going on with Peter Parker's device, I'll just bring up our settings area so we can have a look at these device controls. So we have a device classification policy where we can, build up those policies to say, actually, are you a high risk device or are you a low risk device? So if I look at a low risk device first, this is what we'd expect. So we'd expect that, he's following the corporate policy. We've got, BitLocker enabled for drive encryption, and we've got our, AV enabled, so Defender in this case, and signatures are all up to date. So if everything is all okay, then actually these products should be enabled and should be working. If everything is not okay, then actually you suddenly becomes high risk, and actually maybe Defender's turned off, maybe the BitLocker's turned off. So at that point, we want to enact a high risk policy and him to be targeted and potentially blocked accordingly. Now, when it comes to the other side of this, so the user classification, we can bring in our behavioral analytics. At this point, we're starting to look at user behavior. So what is going on? So we can track his behavior over time, and we can see that most of the time, Mr. Parker is he's a good employee. We can see a reasonably high score here. He's just doing his day job. Happy days. But over here, we can see suddenly there's been a drop off in his score, which has then gone from medium to low, showing his steady downward spiral into some sort of compromise on that device. So if we have a look at our medium event, we can see that there's been various alerts. So he's been downloading some iCar malware files, some more malware has been detected. So lots of malware has been detected on this device. And over time, as we get more and more malware, we'll drop to below a threshold. It's 651 in that scoring methodology. So actually, we've dropped below this, and now he's a poor user. And we can see up here in our detection scenario that actually this is possibly a device which has been infected with malware. So we're having a look at who that user is, what is going on, do we need to be worried about this user, and potentially we can take action based on what's gone on here. What we can also do is for those privileged users, so people who you're really concerned about in the business, people who have got access to the most high levels of data, we can also build out watch lists. So, for example, myself, I've been a very bad boy, it seems. But if we wanted to monitor, key people for, whether DLP, data is leaving their device, whether they're accidentally sharing, whether they've been compromised and data's been shared, if they've got access to that sensitive data, then we can monitor them here in this watch list. So we can see this one, actually, there's a lot of DLP violations. So there's possibly some insider threat here from this user, possibly oversharing data that they probably shouldn't have done. So if I have a look at one of these rules, we can see that actually there's quite a few, bulk downloads of data being going on, some malware as well. So this is probably, again, indicative of some kind of compromise with this user's device to say that actually, data is going somewhere that it shouldn't have gone to. So we're sort of layering on these different visibility tools that we've got around users' data and users' activity to sort of really build out a good picture about what's going on. So I'm just going to dive over into another tenant very quickly to show you a little bit more of some of the other things that we can do when it's looking at, again, users' behavior, what's going on, what's happening with our users. So on this tenant, I've got a few more users in place, so we can show you a few more examples of some of the behavioral analytics that we're able to pick up. So if I break this out, see we've got a few through demo accounts here at the top, so each focusing on different areas of possible compromise. So obviously I've shown you a bit around possible ransomware, some possible compromised devices, but we can also look at things like compromised credentials. So if someone's credentials have appeared in potentially some kind of a breach, then we can spot that as part of our behavioral analytics as well. So we've got a user who's they've used their corporate credentials to log into their device. That's fine, but they then go and access maybe some sort of system over a personal account, so a personal Gmail account or similar. Now, because we see not only the account that logs into the device, but also the account they're using to access the application, if they're going to something which is potentially malicious, or that email address then gets compromised, then that is actually a risk to the business as well, because they might be using that email address in other place, that password in other places. So we can start to coach our users and work with our users to update those sort of passwords. And a few others we can see in here of other things we can do around, if people are logging into AWS and randomly deleting resources from a different IP address to usual. So we can see this has come from a non-Netskope IP address. They're usually protected behind Netskope, but actually all of a sudden they start to delete resources. This again could be indication of some kind of malicious activity. So we can build up this picture. We can control it through our score, looking at the different types of access and how they're approaching what they're connecting to actually start to tailor some of these more dynamic policies. So rather than just saying you're allowed because your name is Dave Smith, you're blocked because your name is Patty SIEMS, we can actually start to base our requirements and our access on compliance. So what is your score level? Have you been behaving in a normal manner? Because a lot of people they'll fit into this green category, so they'll be absolutely fine going about their day job, and we only really need to worry about those people particularly who are starting to do things away from the norm. And just before we hand over to Q&A, I'll just dig into those compromised credentials. We can see a lot of people have got compromised credentials in this tenant. But as you can see, we give you the user in question. So T Willis at Netskope, and then we give you the actual email address that was compromised. So we can let you inform your users that actually T Willis, your T Willis 1981 at Gmail account. That's appeared in a few different breaches. We give you the name of the breaches if you want to go and reference those. But we can give them that actual information, actionable information, they can go away and then work on, possibly changing their passwords, that sort of thing. So I hope this has given you a good flavor about some of the things we can do to help out with some of this user risk and threat risk. And apologies for some of the technical issues we've experienced. What I'm going to do is just hand back to Ben and we'll take any questions that you might have.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Tim. It was really good demo. Good to see some of that, UEBA style functionality from the platform. And yeah, I echo the apologies for the technical difficulties sentiment. One of the questions that I can see is sort of talking around, my sort of compromised insider story earlier and sort of how their SOC team were able to pick up on that. So how does Netskope integrate with sort of other tooling that would be used in a SOC environment? So things like SIEMS and other security technologies for sort of alerting as well. What are the capabilities that we have there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on in Netscope is our ability to integrate with partners, essentially. So yes, we can provide you a lot of information, but sometimes you need this information in other places. Like you said, SIEMs are a great example of that. So to do that, we allow you to, export any of this information that we have in our logging directly into those systems. But we also allow you to do exchange of, threat information and risk information, in fact. So if you're using your Microsoft and you have your risk information, which is coming from Microsoft and what they're seeing, we can ingest that and use that within our scoring system at Netskope. And we can also do the same. So we can export our risk information over to Microsoft. So if you are, interested in bringing those risk scores together, so you've got a really consolidated view about what's going on, then absolutely Netskope can help and integrate with third parties.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that, Tim. So that brings us to the end of the webinar today. Look forward to you joining us for the last one in this series, which is going to be talking about AI. So thank you to everybody for attending today.